Yeah, oh yeah, you weren't supposed to see that. Hello, my name is Nick Lowe. I am a painter, illustrator, and teacher. And I don't do as much design, and that's why most of my photos are going to be blurry and off-center, but we'll try our best. Um, so I work primarily kind of in watercolors, mostly portraiture. When I'm doing more kind of like illustration stuff, it tends to be kind of a wider range of clients, which I found was definitely what was most attractive to me. I kind of work with musicians and magazines, but I'll do things with restaurants or a lot of merchandising and branding. All right, so the keen ear may tell I am not from this country either. I got here from New York a little bit over a year ago. I got my fine arts degree from NYU. Um, yeah, art school I think was really, really helpful for me, but, well, helpful in the sense that I think it's really good to kind of motivate curiosity and creativity, but I did find that it was lacking a little bit in meeting other professionals and finding out all the different kinds of outlets that there were in the professional field in terms of art. It seemed like the only option was really like you become a painter and then maybe you have a show and that's success. That made me a little bit anxious. I've never been somebody who's really wanted to take much ownership in my art. I've never, at the very least, wanted to talk about it. I liked making it and I liked collaborating with people, but I felt like there was this strange pressure and kind of weird world that you had to navigate to be an artist in the sense that it was sort of described to me. And so I was kind of looking for other options or just, who an artist was, what they did aside from just making art, and especially in that collaborative sense. And the first sort of taste I got of something that started to sit right with me was actually with this guy who's a sign maker. I don't know how to make signs. But I did an internship or an apprentice with him, and this was like, he was doing kind of like hand carved, hand painted signs, and so they really were works of art. But I loved the fact that he got to be sort of a translator for people who were passionate about something that he didn't necessarily know or even care about. And that seemed like a really cool idea. And so, although I didn't really know what an illustrator was, the term sounded interesting, and I kind of felt like, all right, this is more the path that I want to be taking. So starting that, like I said, I didn't really have anybody who was kind of explaining how to move through that. And so I started just doing whatever I could. I worked in a bunch of restaurants and I would just offer to design their menus or design chalkboards. I used to go outside and just kind of paint people's houses and try to pawn those off to wherever I could. So it is a very slow grind, or at least it was for me. And the biggest part was feeling confident enough to, say, this is my profession as opposed to a hobby. And then especially when you get into the conversation of charging people money for this thing, I think can be pretty awkward to navigate. So finding your confidence is pretty difficult. So I find that there's a strange kind of thing with when you're doing work that you're passionate about, people kind of think that it doesn't require any effort to do and you can just kind of snap your fingers and then it's done. You wouldn't really do that with someone who maybe they really like to fix cars, but you probably pay them to fix your car. And so it's a hard thing. It's less so about how much money should I be getting? It's more so what is the value of the work that you do? And so there are plenty of free jobs that I did that were some of the most valuable things that I did, right? Because I had people, or things that I knew maybe would help kind of expand my portfolio, or relationships that I was making that I knew down the line this would be worthwhile, or maybe it's just even something that you find to be kind of fulfilling. That being said, you are your brand, right? And that's another really difficult thing of how to showcase yourself and think of yourself as a brand and a singular thing. And I think something that I'm always struggling with is kind of focusing my artwork down to not necessarily a singular style, because I don't think you need to limit yourself in that way, but a style that is palatable to people who are looking for it, right? Because most of the people that are looking for someone like an illustrator, they don't really have the time or the energy to like sit through your stuff and find like, oh, this person seems talented. They want something that resonates with them and resonates with them quickly and showcases you as opposed to the next person, because there are certainly a lot of us. Yeah, and then learning how to present your work and present yourself, which I think is, I'd say that most of the jobs that I got were not necessarily because I did good work, but because I showed that I was down to collaborate. And that's what I enjoy the most. And I think that's what has kind of helped my success the most. You show up. It's a hard thing that we take for granted, but like we're doing now, kind of knowing how to communicate with people, learning how to take notes and effectively apply them to something else. So, supplementing your income. Um, Another thing that I didn't realize was just like the wealth of things that you can be doing that still are creative and still are fulfilling, but you don't necessarily think about it, or at least I didn't. One of the big things when I moved here, it was a little over a year ago, so it was right at the crack of the pandemic. And so there was still work, but it definitely felt like it was slowing down. And I think as freelancers, there's always a fire under us of like, when's my next job coming? What am I going to do? And so it's nice if you can have something, of which there are a lot of things to do out there, no matter, even if they're small, you do a lot of them and they pay off, you know? And so when I moved here, I immediately looked for a job teaching art, like kind of just doing private classes. And I found this company with kind of kids and adults where I was teaching painting. And I had done a little bit of teaching in New York, but it's kind of a skill that can be separate than the skill that I felt that I had. And so it was a little bit difficult, and it still is difficult, but validating. And I find that if you can find things to do that supplement your work, and especially if they're still creative, they often motivate you to keep doing your thing. Like as much as it can be tough, like when I'm in a rut, I find the teaching stuff gets me going into my own thing, even if it's like, I cannot keep doing this, so let me hustle on to the next one. Yeah, and like we were saying, like I think this is just sort of a really kind of special time for creative. So I don't really have the analytics, but I think now more than ever, like marketing agencies or just, you know, companies in general, or just single business owners, like they're seeing the value of attaching artwork to whatever it is that they make. And so, you know, you go on Behance and like whether it's a big kind of ad campaign or someone who's like making fresh squeezed juices and they want you to kind of make a sticker for them, like that stuff is out there in a way that feels like it's growing exponentially, which is really cool. So yeah, on that note, there are all these platforms to find work, and I don't think I never take a job and think like, oh, this seems like too little or whatever. Like it's just another job, and I sit down and I'm having fun doing the thing that I do. And then the last thing is finding an agent, which I felt kind of conflicted about when I was younger. I go back to that kind of business sense, which I don't think is inherent to artists. That's like a whole another skill, and I would often feel really awkward about like having the conversation about money and thinking like, oh, am I supposed to quantify the work that I do, or like, you know, that subject of like, what is the value? And so there is a lot of value to having someone do that work for you and to finding you consistent work, even if it's small, but you do pay for it. And that's really just kind of where you're at. When I was in New York, I did have an agent, and I found it to be helpful, and to circle to that confidence thing. I felt like that person kind of helped me find my own confidence to feel validated enough to find my own work. So yeah, just to kind of show you like the past few things I've done in the last few months, and more so like the variety of them. This was a campaign that we did with a clothing company called Yevu that makes everything out of Ghana and is kind of very dedicated to having a social impact out there. Um, Recently, they just opened an LGBT center out there, and it was shut down, and a whole lot of drama like there is in a lot of the world. And so they did a really cool campaign where they commissioned me to do some paintings for them to raise money and raise awareness. And that's another thing that I find sort of at this stage in my career of like, it's nice to, it feels like moving forward, the fact that I can choose the projects that feel fulfilling to me and feel validating. And I think that is definitely not something to be taken for granted. Yo, it's dark. Yeah, this is just to show you kind of like what like some branding stuff I did with a restaurant in the West Indies. Some more like branding logo work with this guy who was a knife maker who was trying to capitalize. He just won like a reality show, and so he's trying to sell a lot of T-shirts. This was something I did with Complex Magazine and this company called Neighborhood Spot, where they were raising money for smaller businesses in New York that were affected by COVID. So again, I felt very lucky, despite everything in this past year, that there seemed to be a lot of opportunities for me to make art in a way that felt like I had some kind of effect and was doing something that made me feel not important, but made the work feel validated. And then lastly, I thought maybe I'd kind of tell you some things that are still really difficult for me, of which all of these things that I talk about are still really difficult for me. But using social media to your advantage, I think is just like, it is the most useful tool we have right now. And I go back to what I was saying about like not wanting to take ownership of my art and how illustration felt like such an easy way to be like an art assassin and just silent and deadly, and I get out of the room and I do my thing. But you got to lean into it. People really want to see your work, and it's important to create things all the time. I feel like I have, because this is my job, it's easy to slip into this association that I'm only going to do work when it's for a client, so it's hard to like find the place to do it for yourself. But you can find something that's sort of in the middle of that, right? It all helps what you are doing. So yeah, making things just every day. And then for me, I do a job and then I feel like, all right, well, I did it and I'm going to take a break for 2 months because I don't have to worry so much. But that is super unhelpful. And I think like I found the most success with like building a routine where I'm able to disassociate my job and my work and paying my bills from making art and just making art for me, which is my brand. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you guys.